The hall was silent. Silent except for the heavy steps of armored guards. They dragged a prisoner across the floor, her hands bound in metal cuffs that glowed faint red. She stumbled, blood dripping from her mouth, and fell to her knees in front of the judges. Her name was Sira. Once she had been a voice of warning, a woman who stood in front of crowds and shouted of danger. Now she had no tongue. The Empire had cut it from her mouth. The judges sat above her on tall chairs, their robes heavy with gold and iron. Their eyes were sharp, cold, and unfeeling. One of them rose and declared in a deep voice, "This woman lied. She poisoned the minds of citizens with false words. She has been punished." The crowd, a mix of aliens and humans, muttered softly. Most lowered their heads. Some nodded in fear, afraid to disagree. But one man did not look away. His name was Elias, a human mechanic who worked in the shipyards of the Empire. He was young, no more than 30, with grease still under his fingernails from the day's labor. He had not planned to be here in this court, but he had come out of curiosity. And now he could not look away. He watched Sierra's face. She should have looked broken. She should have looked empty. But she did not. Even without her tongue, her eyes burned with a fire that made Elias uneasy. The judge spoke again. "Her words are lies. Her warnings are nothing. She spoke of shadows that do not exist. She claimed enemies approach our worlds. But the Empire is strong. The Empire is eternal. She is nothing." The guards struck their staffs on the ground, and the echo filled the chamber. Sierra lifted her head. Blood still on her lips, she looked at the judges, then at the crowd. She could not speak. She had no tongue. But her eyes screamed louder than any voice. Elias felt a chill crawl across his skin. He had seen liars before. He had seen thieves, criminals, men and women caught in tricks and lies. They always looked away when truth was spoken. They always broke under shame, but this woman did not. She looked as if she carried truth heavier than chains. The judge raised his hand. "Take her away. Let all who see this remember. Lies have a price. The Empire will cut the tongue of deceit. We will silence the poison." The guards pulled her up. She struggled, weak but unbroken, and for one moment her gaze found Elias. It was only a second, a heartbeat. But Elias felt it strike him deep. Her eyes said something, even if no sound left her mouth. A question. A warning. A truth that the judges wanted buried. The guards dragged her through the great doors, and the sound of them closing was like thunder. The hall emptied. The crowd returned to their lives, speaking of the punishment, nodding to the Empire's justice. But Elias stayed seated, staring at the empty space where she had knelt. Something about it felt wrong. He thought of her eyes. They had not been the eyes of a liar. They had not been the eyes of a broken woman. They had been the eyes of someone who knew something too dangerous to speak. As he left the court, the words of the judge echoed in his mind. She claimed enemies approach our worlds, enemies, shadows, warnings. If it was all lies, why cut her tongue? Why not let her speak and then prove her wrong? Why silence her so completely? Elias walked back to the shipyard that night with his hands heavy and his thoughts heavier. He heard the clang of machines, the hiss of steam, the groan of giant alien ships being repaired under the Empire's eye. He had lived here for years, fixing engines, welding broken hulls, tightening bolts on weapons he did not even understand. He had lived quietly, obeying orders, keeping his head down, but now he could not. Not after seeing her. The image stayed with him. The woman's eyes, the blood, the silence. The Empire said she lied. But Elias had seen something different. He sat on a metal crate outside the hangar and looked up at the stars. They were sharp and cold like tiny knives in the black sky. And for the first time, Elias felt something he had not felt before. Doubt. What if she had been telling the truth? The shipyard was always noisy. Sparks rained from welding torches, hammers struck against steel, and the air smelled of burnt oil. Elias had lived in that noise for years. It was the rhythm of his life, fixing broken engines, tightening loose plates, following orders. But tonight, after the trial, the noise felt distant. He worked with tools in his hands, yet his mind kept returning to the silent woman. Her eyes, her blood, her warning that had been cut away. Every time he blinked, he saw her mouth opening, trying to speak a truth that no one was allowed to hear. He shook his head and forced himself to focus. A guard had dropped off a small transport engine for repair. Elias bent over it, checking wires and coolant pipes. But his hands trembled and a screw slipped from his fingers. It clinked on the floor and rolled into the shadows. Clumsy, aren't we, human? A voice said. Elias looked up. It was Derek, one of the alien overseers. His gray skin shimmered under the work lights and his 4 eyes blinked slowly. He sneered, his teeth sharp like broken glass. Too much drink last night? Derek asked. Elias wiped sweat from his brow. No, just tired. Derek stared at him for a moment, then gave a thin smile. Keep your head down, mechanic. Humans who think too much usually break faster. He walked away, his boots echoing against the metal floor. Elias let out a slow breath. He had always been careful. He had always done as told. But now even the overseers seemed to sense his distraction. Later, during the meal break, Elias sat alone at the edge of the hangar, chewing a piece of dry bread. Around him, workers whispered. Most kept their voices low, glancing at the guards to be sure they were not overheard. But Elias caught fragments of their words. The woman in the court said something about the stars. A lie, or maybe not. Elias leaned closer, pretending not to listen. One worker, an old man with scars on his hands, muttered, I heard she spoke of ships, dark ones, waiting in the void. Another shook his head quickly. Quiet. Do you want to lose your tongue too? The old man fell silent, but his eyes betrayed fear. Elias stared at his bread, his chest tight. So he wasn't the only one who had heard the whispers. That night, when the hangar emptied and the guards grew lazy, Elias stayed behind. He walked near the prison wing, pretending to be checking the coolant lines. Through the bars of a dim cell, he saw her. Sira. She sat in the corner, her body weak, her head bowed. Her hands rested on her knees, chains clinking softly whenever she moved. The torchlight flickered across her face, pale and worn, yet still burning with the same fire he had seen in the court. Elias hesitated, his heart pounding. He shouldn't be here. If anyone caught him, he'd be punished. Maybe worse. But something pulled him forward. He knelt near the bars and whispered, I saw you in the court. I don't think you're a liar. Sira lifted her head slowly. Her eyes met his. She said nothing, she could say nothing, but her gaze was sharp, alive. Elias swallowed hard. If what you said was true, if something is coming, then why silence you? For a moment she only stared. Then with slow, careful movement she drew a finger across the dusty floor of her cell. She scratched out shapes. First a circle, then lines across it. A star map. Elias leaned closer, his breath catching. He recognized the marks. He had seen them in navigation charts, systems beyond the border of the Empire. Sira pressed her finger hard into one point on the map, almost as if she wanted to stab through the floor. Her eyes never left Elias's face. Elias whispered, Something is there. She nodded once. He felt a shiver run through him. Voices echoed in the hall, guards approaching. Sira wiped the map away with her chains, smearing the dust until nothing remained. She sat back against the wall, her face blank, as if nothing had happened. Elias rose quickly, grabbed a nearby wrench, and pretended to be checking a pipe. 2 guards walked past, laughing about their dice games. They did not even glance into the cell. When the footsteps faded, Elias dared one last look at her. Sira's eyes met his again, full of silent urgency. Elias turned away, his heart racing. He returned to the hangar, but his mind was no longer his own. The map burned inside him. The warning pressed against his skull. She had told the truth. He could feel it. The Empire had silenced her not because she lied, but because she was right. That night, Elias lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling. He heard the hum of the shipyard engines, the distant clang of tools. But beneath it all, he heard another sound, her silence. A silence heavier than any scream. And in that silence, Elias felt the first spark of fear. Not fear of the Empire, fear of what was coming. The prison wing was a place most workers avoided. The walls dripped with moisture from broken pipes, and the air carried the sharp smell of rust and old blood. Guards patrolled in pairs, their boots heavy against the stone floor, their voices harsh with boredom. Elias had no reason to be there. At least no reason the Empire would accept. But something stronger than reason kept pulling him back. For 3 nights he walked past the edge of the wing, pretending to check coolant valves and air filters. Each time he caught a glimpse of her, Sira, sitting against the wall of her cell, silent and still. Each time he felt her eyes on him, like a fire burning through the bars. On the fourth night, when the guards were distracted by their dice games in the mess hall, Elias slipped into the shadows near her cell. His heart pounded so hard he thought the sound would betray him. She was awake. Her head lifted as he came closer, and the faint torchlight revealed her face, pale, bruised, but alive. Her lips were cracked, her mouth still healing from where the Empire had cut her tongue. Yet her eyes shone like twin blades in the dark. Elias knelt beside the bars, his voice barely a whisper. "I came back." She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "I don't know why," Elias admitted. "Maybe because I can't stop thinking about your eyes. They don't look like the eyes of a liar." She shifted, chains scraping against the floor. Slowly, she raised her hand and tapped the dust again. Elias watched as she drew another star map, this one more detailed than before. Circles for systems, lines for paths. She marked one spot with a heavy stroke, then circled it twice. Elias frowned. He recognized the system. It was near the border. Ships often vanished there, but the Empire always claimed it was due to engine failures or pirate raids. Syrah's eyes locked onto his. She pointed at the circle again, then slowly dragged her finger across the map, away from the border and toward their world. Something was moving, coming closer, Elias whispered. "An invasion?" She nodded once, his stomach tightened. He wanted to argue, to call it impossible, but he couldn't. He had seen too many strange disappearances logged in shipyard records. He had fixed too many battle-scarred hulls returned from patrols that were never attacked. The Empire was hiding something. Suddenly, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Guards. Syrah's eyes widened. She wiped the map with her chains, smearing the dust into nothing. Elias scrambled, grabbing a loose pipe and pretending to inspect it. Two guards turned the corner, their lanterns spilling light across the floor. One of them yawned. "Still here, human? What are you doing near the cells?" Elias forced a tired laugh. "Coolant leak. If these lines burst, the whole wing will choke on steam. Thought I'd better check." The guard squinted, then grunted. "Just don't take too long. You humans always find excuses to wander." They walked on, boots thudding against the stones. When their light vanished, Elias let out the breath he had been holding. His hands shook as he set the pipe down. Syrah watched him silently. Her eyes softened for the first time, as if in quiet thanks. Elias whispered, "You're asking me to believe you, to trust you. But if you're right, then the Empire has lied to us all." She reached through the bars, her shackled hand trembling. Her fingers brushed against his sleeve. Not a word, not even a sound, but the touch carried more weight than any speech. It said, "I have no tongue, but you can be my voice." Elias pulled back quickly, his heart hammering. He looked around, terrified someone might have seen, but the corridor was empty. He whispered, "I'll come back, but I need proof. If I speak without it, they'll cut my tongue too." Her hand dropped to her lap. She nodded once. That night, Elias left the prison wing more shaken than before. The whisper of doubt inside him had grown louder, no longer just a thought, but a call. Back in the shipyard, he opened restricted logs, old reports, and repair records. Ships listed as lost to pirates, all traced near the same system Syrah had drawn. Engines melted from strange heat, hulls scarred by weapons the Empire never named. The more he read, the more the truth took shape. She had not lied. She had spoken what the Empire wanted buried, but if the truth was this dangerous, then Elias had already stepped too far. His fate was now tied to hers. Lying in his bunk, he stared at the ceiling, hearing the drip of water in the pipes above him. Sleep would not come. He could still feel her fingers brushing his sleeve, still see her eyes blazing through the bars. The Empire had cut her tongue to silence her, but her silence had found a new voice. His. The shipyard was quiet in the early hours of the night. Most workers had gone back to their bunks, and the guards were half asleep in their towers. For Elias, this silence was perfect. He sat at his workbench with the glow of an old monitor casting pale light across his face. The machine hummed as he typed in stolen codes. These were codes meant only for overseers, but Elias had collected them over years of fixing their consoles. A loose cable here, a forgotten passkey there. Small things no one noticed. Now those small things gave him a door. He opened the Empire's internal records, scrolling through pages of repair reports. The words were cold and simple. Vessel lost due to reactor breach, destroyed by pirates, navigation error caused total failure. But Elias knew ships. He knew metal, engines, heat shields, and fuel injectors. and what he read did not make sense. One log described a cruiser found drifting, its hull torn open by collision. Elias leaned closer. The damage was not collision, it was weapon fire. Clean cuts, melted edges, the marks of beams that cut steel like paper. Another report claimed a patrol ship exploded from engine failure, but the fragments showed patterns of energy burns, like claws of light had shredded it apart. Each report ended the same way. Classified, do not question. Elias rubbed his eyes, his chest heavy. Sierra's star map was not just a warning. It was the truth behind all these lies. The cursor blinked on the screen. Elias pulled up star charts and cross-checked them with the dates of the accidents. Every ship lost traced back to the same border system, the one Sierra had circled in her cell. He sat back, cold spreading through him. She had known all along. A sound behind him made him jump. Working late, human? Elias spun. It was Mara, another mechanic, her hair streaked with grease, her arms folded. She raised a brow. You're not fixing engines. What are you looking at? His mouth went dry. If she reported him, he was finished. He forced a weak smile. Just checking old logs. Wanted to understand why the ships keep breaking. Mara stepped closer. Her eyes narrowed at the screen. That's not for us. That's overseer work. You'll lose your tongue if they catch you. Elias hesitated. He could lie. He could laugh it off. But something in her eyes, tired, restless, almost like his own, stopped him. He lowered his voice. Mara, listen. Those ships, they weren't accidents. Something hit them. Something out there, she frowned. Pirates? No, not pirates, stronger, faster. Something the Empire doesn't want us to know. Mara stared at him for a long moment, then leaned closer. You sound like her. Elias's heart jumped. You heard her too? Mara glanced around to be sure no one was near. Everyone heard her before they cut her tongue. She said shadows were moving. She said the Empire was lying. But now look where she is. She pointed at her own mouth and drew a line across it. Elias lowered his head. I know, but what if she was right? Mara shook her head quickly. Don't say that. Don't even think it. You'll bring trouble on both of us. She turned and walked away, her boots echoing, but her voice trembled, as if fear had taken hold of her too. When she was gone, Elias returned to the screen. His hands trembled, but he could not stop now. He copied fragments of the reports onto a small data chip, sliding it into his pocket. Proof. Not enough to convince everyone, but enough to show her, to show Sierra, that he believed. The following night, Elias returned to the prison wing. He waited until the guards were distracted by their card games, then slipped into the shadows near her cell. Sierra was awake. Her eyes brightened when she saw him. Elias pulled the chip from his pocket and held it through the bars. I found it. Reports of ships destroyed. They blamed pirates' accidents, but the damage doesn't lie. It matches your map. You were telling the truth. Her chained hands shook as she reached for the chip. She couldn't speak, but tears welled in her eyes. She closed her fingers around the small piece of metal, clutching it like it was a lifeline. Elias whispered, The Empire knows. They're hiding it, but why? Why would they silence you instead of preparing for what's coming? She pressed her forehead against the bars, her eyes filled with pain and urgency. Elias's throat tightened. He understood what she wanted to say, even without words. The Empire cared more about power than truth. If they admitted danger, it would show weakness. And weakness was forbidden. He wanted to stay, to keep speaking to her, but footsteps echoed in the hall. Guards again. Elias pulled back fast, his heart racing. He pretended to fix a pipe as two guards strolled past. One yawned, the other laughed about dice. They did not notice him. When they were gone, Elias dared one last look. Sierra was still clutching the chip, her eyes shining in the dark. As he slipped away, a single thought burned in his mind. The Empire had silenced her. But he had found her voice, and now he carried her truth inside him. The next morning, Elias walked into the shipyard with heavy steps. The sun above the colony was dim and red, filtered through a thick haze of smoke. Usually the day began with the clang of tools and the shouts of overseers. Today it felt different. Too quiet, too watchful. He carried his toolbox and tried to look normal. But inside his chest was tight. He could still see Sierra's eyes shining in the dark, clutching the data chip as though it was her last hope. He had given her proof, but now that proof tied him to her, and the Empire did not forgive. As he worked on a damaged transport engine, Elias noticed Mara across the hangar. She was supposed to be welding, but she kept glancing toward him. Once their eyes met, and she quickly looked away. The overseer, Derek, stalked the floor with his 4 eyes scanning every corner. His boots clicked hard against the steel. Normally he shouted insults or gave orders, but today he was quiet, his gaze sharp like a hunter searching for prey. Elias felt sweat on his neck. He bent lower over the engine, pretending to adjust wires. At midday, while the workers ate their rations, whispers spread like smoke. Another mechanic vanished last night, taken from his bunk. No warning. They say he asked too many questions about lost ships. The voices dropped when guards passed. The workers stared at their bowls of thin soup, chewing without tasting, their shoulders tense. Elias's stomach turned. He knew that mechanic. His name was Raylan, a quiet man who fixed cooling systems. Raylan had never caused trouble, never spoken loud. But he had once asked Elias why so many patrol ships came back with hulls scarred. Now he was gone. Elias set down his bowl and rubbed his hands together. His skin was cold, though the air was warm. That night, as he returned to his bunk, he saw 2 guards outside his dormitory. They were speaking with Mara. She stood stiff, her face pale, nodding quickly to whatever they said. When she spotted Elias, her eyes flicked toward him, then away, fast as lightning. The guards didn't stop him. They just watched as he passed. Their eyes followed him until he stepped inside. He lay in his bunk with his heart pounding. The walls felt too close, the air too thin. He stared at the ceiling pipes and whispered to himself, "They know. They know someone is digging." He thought of leaving, of stealing a small ship and vanishing into the void, but the thought faded as quickly as it came. Where would he go? And what about her? What about Sira? If he ran, her truth would die with her. The next evening, Elias was ordered to repair a scout vessel. Derek himself handed him the work order. "You fix it fast, human," Derek said, leaning close. "We need it ready. Important mission." His voice was low, almost mocking. Elias nodded quickly, but unease prickled through him. Inside the scout vessel, while checking the systems, Elias found something strange. The logs had been wiped clean. Not unusual, except this time, the entire navigation history was gone. Not corrupted, not damaged, erased. Someone had flown this ship to the border system. Someone had seen what waited there, and then someone had erased every trace. Elias sat in the cockpit staring at the blank screen. His hands shook. The conspiracy was no longer whispers or guesses. The Empire knew of the threat. They had proof too, but instead of warning the colonies, they were burying it. He left the ship and walked back to the hangar floor, his mind heavy. Mara was there, her eyes darting nervously. When no guard was near, she hissed under her breath, "They're watching you." "Stop before it's too late." Elias stopped, his voice low. "You know I can't. You saw the logs. You've seen the scars on the ships." Mara's lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't answer, but fear filled her eyes. That night, Elias returned again to the prison wing. The guards were lazy, playing dice near the entrance. He slipped through the shadows, his footsteps silent. Sira was awake, waiting. Her eyes widened as he appeared. He knelt by the bars and whispered, "It's worse than I thought. They know. They erased logs. They destroyed records. They cut your tongue not for lies, but because the truth was too dangerous for them." Her chained hands trembled. She pressed her fingers to the bars, looking at him with a mix of sorrow and determination. Elias swallowed hard. "They'll come for me soon. Maybe for you again, too. But we can't stop now. If we stay silent, the shadows will reach us all." For a moment, the prison was silent. Only the drip of water echoed in the corridor. Then faintly, voices rose from the guards. Laughter, dice hitting the table. But behind that laughter, Elias thought he heard something else. Steps quieter, deliberate. He froze, his breath caught. Someone was coming. Not the lazy guards. Someone else. Sira's eyes widened with warning. Elias rose quickly, grabbed a nearby wrench, and pretended to be checking the pipes. His heart pounded, his ears straining. From the shadows emerged Derek. His 4 eyes gleamed in the torchlight. He stopped in the middle of the corridor and stared at Elias. For a long, tense moment, neither spoke. Then Derek smiled, slow and cruel. "Working late again, human?" he said softly. Elias gripped the wrench tighter, his throat dry. He forced a nod. Coolant lines. Derek's smile widened. Of course, you humans are always curious. Just remember, curiosity is the fastest way to lose your tongue. He turned and walked away, his boots echoing in the dark. Elias stood frozen until the sound faded. Only then did he dare to breathe. When he looked back at Sierra, she was staring at him with fierce eyes. Her silence said everything. The conspiracy was no longer hidden. It had seen him too. The night sky above the colony was always filled with the glow of ships. Cargo haulers drifted in and out. Patrol cruisers floated like watchful hawks, and the Empire's banners burned bright on every hull. To most, it was a picture of power. To Elias, it had become a mask. He lay awake in his bunk, staring at the ceiling. His body was tired from hours of labor, but his mind refused to rest. He thought of Derek's warning, of Mara's fearful eyes, of Raylan vanishing without a trace. And most of all, he thought of her, Sierra, clutching the data chip as if it were her last breath. The Empire could silence her. They could erase records, but they could not stop what was coming. Elias sat up, his heart pounding. He had to see it for himself. That night he slipped into the scout vessel he had repaired days ago. The hangar was quiet, most workers asleep. The guards patrolled lazily, half drunk from their dice games. Elias moved with purpose, every step measured, every breath silent. He climbed into the cockpit, sealed the hatch, and powered up the systems. The engines purred to life with a low hum. For a moment he thought someone would hear, but the noise of the hangar swallowed it. He guided the vessel out of the dock and into the sky. The colony shrank below him, a cluster of lights against the dark surface of the world. Stars stretched out before him, endless and cold. He set the course for the system Sierra had circled. His hands shook as he locked the coordinates. "If I die," he whispered, "at least I'll know." Hours passed in silence as the ship cut through space. Elias stared at the black void ahead, the stars unmoving except for the faint streaks of light as the vessel drifted through faster-than-light lanes. Then, near the edge of the border, his sensors began to flicker. Static spread across the screens. The navigation system glitched, numbers spinning wildly. Elias leaned forward. "What's wrong with you?" he muttered, tapping the console, and then he saw it. At first it looked like shadows, long shapes sliding across the stars, so faint he thought his eyes played tricks on him. But the shadows grew sharper. They were ships, massive ships, dark as stone, moving without lights, without signals. They blotted out the stars one by one as they advanced. Elias's breath caught. His hands gripped the console so tightly his knuckles turned white. The scanner flared with a warning. Unidentified signatures detected. Fleet size unknown. His mouth went dry. It wasn't just a few ships. It was an armada. Dozens, maybe hundreds. And they were moving. Elias tried to back the vessel away, but suddenly, a beam of light swept across his hull. His sensors screamed with alerts. The ship shook, metal groaning under the force of invisible energy. Panic surged through him. He pulled hard on the controls, forcing the scout vessel into a dive, cutting across a nearby asteroid field. Rocks spun past, sharp and jagged. The alien fleet did not chase. They didn't need to. Their slow advance spoke louder than any attack. They were not hunting him. They were hunting the Empire. Elias's heart hammered as he pushed the engines to maximum, racing back toward the colony. The ship rattled and shuddered, the warning lights flashing red. Hours later, the colony's lights reappeared, tiny specks against the planet's dark surface. Elias guided the ship back into the hangar, his body trembling, sweat dripping from his face. He powered down the engines and slipped out before anyone noticed. Back in his bunk, he sat in the dark, breathing hard. His hands still shook. He had seen it. The unstoppable threat. The Shadow Fleet. The next evening, Elias returned to the prison wing. He didn't care anymore if the guards saw him. He needed her to know. Sierra was there, waiting, her chains clinking as she shifted forward. Elias gripped the bars, his voice hoarse. "You were right. I saw them. Ships giants moving through the dark. A fleet so large it could crush the Empire. They're coming, and the Empire is doing nothing." Her eyes filled with fire. She pressed her chained hands to the bars, shaking them. Her mouth opened as if she still had her tongue. as if she wanted to scream the truth into the world. But only silence came. Elias lowered his head. We can't stop them alone. But I can't stay silent anymore. If I do, millions will die without even knowing why. Sierra's eyes softened, glistening with tears. She pressed her hand against the bars, palm open. Elias lifted his hand and placed it against hers. Cold iron separated them, but the touch was real. The silence between them was filled with meaning. For the first time, Elias felt not just doubt, not just fear, but resolve. The unstoppable threat was coming. And if the Empire would not act, then he would. The colony slept under a false sky. Bright banners of the Empire glowed on towers. Patrol ships circled above, and guards walked the streets as if nothing could ever break their power. To most citizens, it looked like peace. To Elias, it looked like blindness. He had seen the fleet. He had felt their shadows move across his ship, silent and unstoppable. Now every moment that passed felt borrowed. He couldn't shake the thought, they are coming and no one knows. But someone had to know. Someone had to hear. That night, Elias crept into the shipyard again, moving quickly between dark corners. His hands shook, but his mind was steady. He had stolen a small transmitter from the scout vessel, a device strong enough to send a message across colonies before the Empire could silence it. In the hangar, he climbed into an old cargo shuttle. It was outdated, its engines groaning with age, but its comms still worked. Elias sealed the hatch and connected the transmitter to the console. Lights flickered, screens came alive, and a hum filled the cabin. His heart raced. Once he sent the message, there would be no going back. He thought of Sierra, silent behind bars, clutching the truth with broken chains. She had lost her voice, but she had given him hers. Elias closed his eyes. Then he began to speak. This is Elias, mechanic of the outer shipyards. To every human colony, to every worker, to anyone who will listen, I bring you a warning. The Empire lies. The woman they silenced spoke the truth. I have seen what she saw. A fleet moves through the dark, larger than any we have faced. They are coming for us all. If we stay silent, we will be destroyed. His voice shook, but he forced it steady. They cut her tongue to bury the truth. But I will not let it stay buried. Listen to me. Look to the border stars. You will see them. Prepare, because the Empire will not. He hit the transmit key. The message burst out across the networks, carried on hidden channels, bouncing between satellites. It was out there now, unstoppable. Alarms blared almost instantly. Red lights flashed in the hangar, and a harsh voice rang through speakers. Unauthorized broadcast detected. Seize the human! Elias cursed and grabbed his bag. He ran from the shuttle as guards stormed the hangar. Shouts filled the air. Boots thundered against the floor. He sprinted through the maze of pipes and crates, his lungs burning. He knew he couldn't escape the colony. They would find him. But maybe, just maybe, the message had already spread far enough. At the edge of the prison wing, he skidded to a stop. He couldn't leave her. Not after everything. He rushed to Sierra's cell, slamming his hands against the bars. She looked up, her eyes wide. I did it, Elias whispered, breathless. I sent it. They'll hear you now. They'll know. Her eyes filled with tears, and she pressed her chained hands against the bars. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Her silence and his trembling voice bound together in a single truth. Shouts echoed closer. The guards were coming. Sierra shook her head sharply, urging him to run. But Elias didn't move. They cut your tongue, he whispered, but they didn't cut your truth. It's out there now. Even if they kill me, they can't stop it. The cell shook as boots pounded down the corridor. Torches flared. Derek emerged from the shadows, his 4 eyes burning with rage. Traitor, Derek hissed. You think your words matter? The Empire will erase them just as we erased her. Elias straightened, his voice steady. You can erase logs. You can cut tongues. But you can't erase the stars. They're coming, whether you admit it or not. Derek sneered and raised his weapon. The guards moved in. Sierra slammed her fists against the bars, her eyes blazing. Her silent scream filled the corridor, louder in Elias's mind than any sound could have been. The guards seized him, dragging him away. But Elias did not fight. He looked back at her one last time. Her eyes met his, and in them he saw not despair, but fire. Outside the prison, alarms still blared. Across the colonies, workers stirred as strange messages spread through the networks. Whispers grew into shouts, shouts into cries. The Empire's silence cracked as fear spread among its people. Some would dismiss the warning. Some would believe. But the truth had been spoken, and somewhere beyond the border stars the shadow fleet moved closer, silent and patient. In her cell, Sierra closed her eyes. For the first time since they cut her tongue, she felt heard. Her truth had found a voice.